In this video, I really want to talk about 3 techniques that work in the coldest water that you will fish. Now, for me here in Ohio, typically the coldest water is like mid 30s, upper 30s, low 40s, somewhere in that kind of range. These techniques all work really well there. So depending on where you live in the country, I know that some of you guys are already iced out and like you can't go out there and fish, but if you can still fish, these are the 3 techniques that I would highly suggest fishing. Now, before we get into those, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. And right now, today is the last day for the Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals. So everything right now on the website is basically 20 to 30% off. Also, every single order that is placed is going to get a free lure of some sort. I have this giant bin here full of a ton of different baits, and I'm going to be putting one of these baits in every single package, no matter what you buy. Also, anyone who buys, I guess until tonight, really until tomorrow when I actually start the shipping process, is going to be put into a drawing to win a free ARC Cobb Series rod. So this is a $100 rod, and this is a very versatile rod. 6 foot 10 inch little skipper rod. You can use jigs, Texas rigs, spinner baits, buzz baits with this rod. It is a very versatile rod, and one of you lucky people who order from Fin Fishing may receive this on your doorstep as well. Now, I'm not going to be asking for any information because I will have it all via Fin Fishing, and so if someone reaches out to you asking for info, it is not me, and it is probably a scam. So just be aware of that. All right, links are down below in the description. All right, let's talk about these techniques. Like I said, no matter where I go this time of the year, whether it's a pond, a lake, or a river, which I don't fish a ton of rivers during this time of year, but ponds and lakes, like these are the techniques that will work. Now, the first one is really kind of 2 techniques, but I use them in a lot of the exact same situations, and I will kind of tell you the differences in where I prefer one or another. Now, those techniques are a Ned rig / shaky head. These are great cold water baits. Now, the primary reason that these are great cold water baits is because typically when you use a Ned rig or you use a shaky head, you are using a straight tail worm of some sort. You are using a worm that does not have a lot of action to it. And that is what you want when you are fishing in extremely cold water. You don't want baits that have a ton of action to them. Ones that have very little action tend to get a lot more bites. The other reason that I kind of like a shaky head and a Ned rig over, we'll say, baits like a drop shot, even though I absolutely love a drop shot, pretty much the rest of the year I'll have a drop shot, but in really cold water, I prefer the Ned rigs and the shaky heads because a lot of bass are literally sitting with their bellies on the bottom during this time of the year. I have caught fish in very cold water where you get them out of the water and there's literal mud on their belly. Like you can wipe the mud off of their belly. And if you see them with your forward-facing sonars of the world, you will see that they are hugging the bottom. And so having a bait like a shaky head or a Ned rig that is right there on the bottom as opposed to a drop shot that kind of suspends your bait up, I think tends to get you a few more bites. And this is one of the few times of the year that I prefer those techniques over a drop shot. And so that is really one of my go-to techniques, either a shaky head or a Ned rig. Now, I will pick a shaky head or a Ned rig kind of depending on the cover or structure that I am fishing. If I'm fishing a little bit more open water where there's not as many things for me to get hung on, I'll probably pick up that Ned rig that has an exposed hook on it. Now, I know that they make Ned rigs that have in Ned rig jig heads that you can kind of more or less Texas rig on there. I don't love those, although I know that they work. And if I'm gonna be fishing around a lot of cover though, that's where I pick up the shaky head. Shaky head comes through cover pretty well. And there's certain jig heads out there that will come through cover a little bit better depending on what that cover is. Maybe it's grass, maybe it's rock, maybe it's wood. It's just going to depend on what you are fishing. But I like that shaky head around a little bit of cover. Now, when it comes to weights of those baits, like I always say, go with the lightest weight that you can get away with, but make sure that you can feel the bottom well. If you're fishing in 30 foot of water, you know, you're not going to want to fish a 16th ounce jig head or an 1/8 ounce jig head, like you're simply not going to have a great feel unless it's dead flat calm out there. Then that might help, but we never get that in the winter anyways. Well, at least I feel like we don't. But anyways, make sure that you can feel the bottom down there and really drag those baits slowly across the bottom. I'm not really yo-yoing these baits. I'm not hopping them off the bottom a lot during this time of the year. I'm really just kind of dragging them across the bottom. But those two are really a great technique, and I kind of lump them into the same category. All right, lure number 2. This is a lure that kind of breaks the rules when it comes to winter fishing for me, but it is absolutely a great fish catching bait, and that is a blade bait. If you guys have not picked up a blade bait, I urge you to do so when you are fishing in cold water. Now, this is a bait that can work outside of cold water as well, fishing it a little bit differently, but it excels in cold water, whether you are fishing for smallmouth, spots, or a largemouth. I have caught a lot of fish on a blade bait in cold water. Now, the reason that I say that this thing kind of breaks the rules of cold water fishing for me is because this is the one bait that I use that actually tends to have a little bit more vibration to it. And as you know, as most of you know, a blade bait is basically a chunk of lead with a little piece of metal on it and a couple of hooks. When you bring that thing off the bottom, and I fish a blade bait a lot like a jig during this time of the year, where I just make really small hops. I try to get that bait to come about a foot off the bottom and sink back down. That is, again, a lot of these fish are on the bottom. A lot of these fish are on the bottom. So I don't want to have a very drastic hook set, or not hook set. I don't want to have a really drastic hop or pump. I just want kind of a little pump. Just get that bait about a foot off the bottom and let it fall back down. Now, when you pump that thing up, you will feel it. You'll feel it vibrate up and then it falls straight down. Now, something that I learned from listening to Benjamin Nowak a number of years ago talking about a blade bait is that I used to fish a blade bait a lot on a bait cast rod. I would throw it on like 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. And the reason being is that a blade bait casts really well. And I tend to like a bait caster when I can get away with it. But something that is, I learned, like I said, from Benjamin, is that when you're fishing a blade bait, you're only hopping it, a foot and a half off the bottom, you want that bait to vibrate as soon as it comes off the bottom. And so in order to get that vibration to start quicker, what you can do is go down on your line size, because using a 12 or 15 pound fluorocarbon is going to somewhat hinder the action of that bait. And so using, what I use now is 10 pound braid to usually an 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon leader. Using that system, you will feel that bait vibrate as soon as you lift it off the bottom. And that is really key. Something, again, thank you, Benjamin. I've used a blade bait on a spinning rod ever since then with 10 pound braid to a 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon leader, depending on how much cover that I'm fishing around. But it is a really good bait. Now, one thing that I do want to mention about blades is that you are going to lose some. They're pretty cheap. They're pretty inexpensive. So you are definitely going to lose some. So just know, because you're fishing a treble hook bait on the bottom, like I will pop it up, let it hit the bottom, and even let it sit there at times. So just know that you are going to lose some. Also, there are 2 bites that you will get on a blade bait. The first one is you pop that bait up, and as soon as it starts to come down, you'll feel that tunk, you'll feel it through your system. Boom, that fish got it right then and there. The other bite that you get, and this tends to happen more the colder the water gets, is that you just go to lift that bait and you feel the weight on there. Like you feel it, you don't ever feel them bite it, you just feel weight. And literally I'm just starting to reel and lift upwards, and you got them on that thing. So that is a really good technique. I highly suggest it. One quick thing about the blade bait I gotta mention too is that make sure you change out the hooks on most blade baits out there. And I like to put either a split ring or a braided split ring on there, because some of these blade baits, I don't know why they do this, but they come with these really stupid 2-pronged hooks on them, and they are not good hooks. And so almost every single treble hook bait out there, I am going to put some sort of, higher quality treble on them. But definitely with the blade bait, make sure that you do that. It will help you in the long run to catch a lot more of those fish that you hook. All right, let's talk about technique number 3. And this is one that is going to be more for guys who have boats and are targeting suspended fish. And so when you're targeting suspended fish, you are primarily going to be using your forward-facing sonar these days. And I know that not all of you are going to be using that. But anyways, that is a jig head minnow. A jig head minnow works phenomenally in cold water. And it is a great way to catch bass that are actively feeding, not always super active, but sometimes they are just suspended high in the water column and sometimes really high in the water column. You might be fishing in 20, 30 foot of water and you will see fish that are 3 to 5 foot below the surface. And so these fish, a lot of times I think, are just trying to get some warmth from the sun, and you can catch these fish with a jig head minnow. Now you definitely need forward-facing sonar to do this. I will 100% admit to that. Like, there's no other way to do it, but it is a great way to catch a lot of fish. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.